Welcome to Shadow of Truth, and today is Monday, October the 17th, 2016, and your hosts are Rory Hall from thedailycoin.org and Dave Kranzler from investmentresearchdynamics.com. What's going on today, Dave?
Same brown stuff, different day. It's just Monday instead of Friday.
Okay. Well, let's just jump in and make something happen. What do you think?
That sounds good to me. It was just how one-sided in the media this election is.
Well, I mean, when you have somebody like the Wall Street Journal coming out and saying that the media is supporting Hillary and attacking Trump, then you know you got issues.
Well, I agree with that for the most part. But here's the thing about, first of all, because I thought about that, and I thought about having Sid read that editorial, but she doesn't even care. These people who are going to vote for Hillary, they know about the Podesta emails. They know about everything. They know about how one-sided CNN is. They don't care. They just think, her thing is, I can't vote for Trump. He's a lunatic. And that's the impression that the media has given these people.
Yep.
And they don't even want to read into the Podesta emails to just see how corrupted. I mean, it's literally like Al Capone's mafia organization, the Clinton campaign. It is unbelievable how rigged it is. And the media, the mainstream media, has just become so one-sided. The problem with the Wall Street Journal is these people, like someone like Sid would say, well, what do you expect? The Wall Street Journal is a business Wall Street rag. And they don't realize that the Wall Street Journal is part of the establishment elitist propaganda.
Yes.
And then they'll just say, and the Wall Street Journal is owned by Rupert Murdoch now. It's owned by Fox. So they would just say, well, what do you expect? Fox supports Trump. So, of course, the Wall Street Journal is going to say that.
Yep. That would be a typical answer. The Podesta emails are some of the most damaging information that has hit the wire to date in regards to
and no one
election.
cares, though. People who support Hillary, I don't think it's changed their mind.
Oh, no. But as far as, people like you and I and people that are reporting on all of these crimes that are documenting everything, then we need that information. We want it's more proof of just how bad the system has become, how terrible everything is, and how criminal and corrupt the sheer depths of corruption that is the Clintons, and it's not just the Clintons. I mean, they're just the latest puppet to be thrown out there. It's all of them, every single one of them.
I agree, it's every single one of them, but I think that the Clintons, I think they're, if you want to say, well, there's a cabal of chess pieces, and it's kings and queens and rooks and bishops, I would say that the Clintons are probably like a rook. They somehow have they've been in D.C. and career politicians, basically. They've been in D.C. for so long. They've got all kinds of money backing them because they somehow, they're both extremely bright people, and they figured out which buttons that they needed to have control of in order to get the people who are the kings and queens to work with them. You know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah, and I agree with that.
And they're very, very, they're just outright very, very dangerous. And this whole thing, like now there's another headline. It's actually on Zero Hedge, but it's a headline from a Republican congressman. Thank God for WikiLeaks doing the job the mainstream media won't. Well, now the Clinton organization and the mainstream media have everyone, all of the, basically the people who get their news from the mainstream media thinking that it's the Russians that are dropping these emails.
Yes.
And no one knows who's dropping them, but it's certainly not the Russians.
That's what, it just cracks me up. Because it's those Russians and it's the Russians. And it's like, it's not the Russians. And the Russians aren't working with Donald Trump. I mean, that's the other part of the ridiculousness of what these people just spew. I mean, gives me a headache.
I the funny thing is, WikiLeaks has been dropping hacked information onto into the internet for several years, and now all of a sudden, when they're exposing corruption that actually directly damages the elitist establishment, now all of a sudden it's the Russians who are doing it.
Right.
WikiLeaks has never been associated with Russia. When Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State and she was trying to get Julian, and they leveled these false pedophile rape charges against Assange. Remember, and he was detained, yep. and that was Hillary Clinton working behind the scenes. She was part of the cabal that was trying to get him put away, because I'm sure they knew that all this stuff was going to come out eventually, yep. especially her. And back then it was never blamed on the Russians. It was blamed on WikiLeaks and Julian Assange.
Right.
Now all of a sudden, no, everyone has a clear view of this stuff. Assange, the charges that were leveled against him were disproved, and now all of a sudden it's the Russians.
Right.
It's just unbelievable. Now, I do think there is a groundswell of people who see this, and I think, and the polls aren't picking it up either. The polls are just as rigged as everything else is.
It's unbelievable.
Now, I did see a Rasmussen poll that came out on Friday. And this was very interesting because Rasmussen, in my experience, Rasmussen has probably been the least biased of any of the polling organizations. And their latest polling shows Trump with a 3-point lead, and it was a swing from whenever a couple weeks before when they'd done the previous poll. And interestingly, now this is interesting, the big swing in support away from Hillary, because he was behind when they did their previous poll by 2 or 3 points. The big swing was with the African American voter segment of the population. And the only, and that's interesting because, and it was a pretty big swing. It went from like something like 8% to 19 or 20% supporting him.
Wow.
Now, the only issue there is, if you're a Trump supporter and you want to have some hope, is that historically the African Americans have a pretty low voter turnout. Now, I know they turned out, I think, in a record number in 2008 when he was his first election. But for whatever reason, they often tend to have a lower turnout than other ethnic demographics.
It'll be interesting to see how the demographics break out for this election. See who's voting and in what kind of numbers, compared to historically.
We may never get the truth. Who knows?
Well, that's part of the problem is that it's becoming more and more difficult every single day to look at any numbers, whether they're poll numbers, whether they're voter count numbers, it's such a nightmare and such a pile of garbage that we have to try to wade through every single day to just to get to the truth. I mean, and then once you arrive at a particular point, you still have to question whether or not it's true. I mean, It's like, or what what's the motivator behind this? Why is this piece of information put out? Why am I supposed to accept this as the truth? And if it is the truth, what's the reason for it? Why did this get out? I mean, and maybe I've just become too cynical.
No, you're right. Often when I see something that's especially in the mainstream media where they're reporting something that's true, it's like, what's going on here?
Right. What am I being set up for?
Yeah, exactly. What are they setting us up for?
I mean, and I want to kind of change gears a little bit because RT, Russia Today, the news organization, their accounts have been shut down this morning, which is a little bit frightening in that,
Their,
what's
yeah,
that?
their bank account in the UK.
Yes, has been shut down. And it just goes to show what what chance that we, as in you and I, people at ground zero, what chance we have. I mean, all they have to do is flip a switch, say, well, we don't like you anymore. You said something wrong. So delete, and all of a sudden your account is frozen. Quote frozen. I mean, well, that in itself, what's happened with Russia Today is the single strongest argument against a cashless society if there ever was one. It is the single strongest argument, in my opinion. I mean, anybody that argues for a cashless society just needs to look at this one situation in isolation and look at it and go, well, it doesn't. Even if there is some kind of criminal, nefarious activity associated with Russia Today, which I highly doubt that there is, doesn't give them the right to go in and shut down their flow of funds. It doesn't, not in my opinion. And that's exactly what could happen to us if we move as we steamroll towards a cashless society.
Well, here's apparently what happened. NatWest said that they've undertaken a review of their banking arrangements with that bank and reached the conclusion that they can no longer provide these facilities. And obviously that's purely political. I agree with you. The problem is in terms of, the cashless thing, but the problem is that commerce largely, especially for, corporate entities, is largely electronic.
Right.
So if they want to participate in, global commerce, they have to be able to have a bank account. So but in terms of what you were saying about the arguments against a cashless banking system, again, it goes back to when I first jumped into the precious metals sector and learned as much as I could about it back in late 2001. I had read an article, and I can't remember who wrote it, and I wish I had saved it. It might have been Eric DeCarbonell, but I can't remember. And they basically said, and I was getting into the junior mining stocks and making a lot of money on them, and I was like, hey, this is great. And they're basically like, look, if you're going to be a true sort of prepper survivalist gold bug, you need to keep all of your cash outside of the banking system in the form of precious metals under your own safeguard. And that's another example right there, as it would apply to individuals like us, as to why that article ultimately is proving to be right. And that makes the good case for BitGold, which is now gold money. But the problem is then you get back to, well, they can just flip the switch on the internet because BitGold operates on the internet.
Well, and I'm glad that you brought that up because I was skipping around this morning and I was looking for, I just went to, there's been so little precious metals news over the past week or so that I just did a Google search for gold news. The very first article that came up, American with 121 pounds of gold arrested in Bolivia. This came out through CBS News, and he was trying to get out of the United States into Bolivia. He had 121 pounds, 55 kilos of gold, and he had several pounds of silver as well. And they, of course, are treating him like a criminal. And he is being investigated for possible smuggling though he has not been charged. So they're just detaining him, treating him like a criminal because he has gold.
The Bolivians did, or the U.S. embassy there?
More than it doesn't say. It's a very short article. Anti-narcotics chief Santiago uh, Del Godlio says Robert Agnew Meyer, so they do give his name, also was found to have, with a small amount of cocaine and several pounds of silver coins. Puts the value of the gold alone at more than $1.5 million. So it prompted me to write an article this morning about getting physical gold across borders because this could be an issue for more people as the deterioration of our economy continues, as far as people trying to get to what they believe to be a safer spot, which I presume is what this gentleman was doing. Is he a criminal? Did he have cocaine on him? Who knows? It's hard to believe. It's hard for me to believe that a 76-year-old man's out there, snorting up lines. I don't see it, but I guess it could happen. But
a hippie. That's 76. That's right in the wheelhouse of being, in the hippie generation. But
well, I mean, but as far as getting gold across border, I mean, how do you do that? I mean, is BitGold going to work? Is selling your gold here, wherever you're at, converting it into cryptocurrency, and then converting it back to physical where you go? I mean, that's
well, I have to say that my first choice of leaving the country and settling down in would not be Bolivia. Raise my eyebrows because typically Bolivia doesn't cooperate with the U.S.
Aren't they the ones that threw the DEA out a few months ago?
Yeah, and so they're not. Yeah, so I was kind of surprised about that. There's probably a lot more going on there than we realize, and so I mean, it does bring up a good point, and about if you want to leave with gold, and that's probably why if you're going to leave the country, you probably want to convert your silver into gold because it obviously would be easier to move around. But I kind of envisioned, and this was probably around '06 or '07, and I was actually thinking about leaving the country back then, and it was sort of at the point where my parents were starting to head into their sunset years, and my sister's two sons were, they were sort of, a little bit under 10. And for me, I just didn't want to leave my family, but I thought seriously about leaving the country. And I kind of figured if I ever needed or wanted to leave the country and I knew that it was going to be a problem getting precious metals out, the way I envisioned doing it would be, load your car up, drive down to the Florida Keys, and then find, some boat runner guy and just bribe him to take you to one of the Caribbean islands, and then you can figure out where to go from there.
That's a good idea too.
And that's the way I think you probably have to do it. Now, again, I don't know why this guy is going to Bolivia because that's not where I would go.
No, I mean but I mean he obviously had his reasons, and that's where he wanted to go, and that's where he wound up, and now they've pretty much confiscated 100. I mean, I just can't get over that. 121 pounds, 55 kilos of gold for an individual. I mean, that's a lot of gold.
The fact, if he really did have cocaine on him, I mean, he's an idiot for doing that. So it's to me, it's one of these one-off stories that it's sort of like, I don't look at it as being inimical to gold. Because, like I said, there's a lot more going on there than they've made available in the press release, and yes, probably no one cares about the story.
Well,
and I didn't even care about it that much when I saw the headline. I didn't read the body of it. I was just like, oh, well, I wouldn't go to Bolivia.
Well, I mean, like I said, it prompted me to internal questions of how do you get gold out of here? How do you get physical gold? Because that's something that they're looking for. I mean, obviously, you know, as we've discussed numerous occasions, what's the first thing that they do when they go in and destroy another country? They take
They
all their
take
gold.
gold, of course.
So, you know,
Right, and I think bit gold or gold money that's how you would do it right now.
that would be
You would
that would be a good way of doing it, I think.
Yep, you'd sell your metal, put it into a bit gold money account. Have it. They got vaults all over the world. Pick a place, Singapore, for instance. Go there, and then you could get your gold out of the Singapore gold money vault.
Yeah, or just use your card and go buy more.
Right there, you go.
That was my thought was. Well, I'll just
Sure, and
I
that's
just
how you do it now. But what if you decide not to leave until after the Oval Office is hit the kill switch on the internet? Then you're screwed.
then
If
you're in
you're relying
trouble.
on gold money.
Then you're in trouble.
And then you load up your car, drive down to the Keys, and find some guy who wants to make a couple 1 ounce gold coin fee to take you in his boat to one of the non-U.S. Caribbean islands.
Yep, that's it.
Well, I just had one little thing I wanted to mention, and it's interesting because there's some serious undercurrents going on in the stock market that I didn't really research into or look into until I was preparing this week's short seller journal. And there's a couple things that are suggestive of the idea that even though they're doing what they can to keep the S&P and the Dow propped up, that their ability to do that might not last. And one of the big divergences, it was actually in a Bloomberg article that really didn't get a lot of, I didn't really see it circulated on the internet. Zero Hedge might have picked it up, who knows, because they pick up Bloomberg articles. But it shows a graph that has, there's a market statistic that shows the percentage of stocks in the S&P 500 trading above their 50-day moving average. And typically the direction of the S&P and that statistic are highly correlated. And whenever they diverge a little bit, they tend to converge. Well, right now, and the data that Bloomberg has goes back to the end of 2014, beginning of 2015. Right now, the percentage of stocks in the S&P trading below their 50-day moving average is a little bit below 40%. And it's completely diverged from the direction of the S&P 500, and it's at its widest divergence since as far as this data goes back, and it suggests that at some point the S&P is going to have to sell off hard in order to converge with this statistic. And then there's a couple other things, and it also that illustrates the fact that they're using just a handful of stocks,
Right.
which primarily the FANG stocks. There's a couple others that they use because Microsoft, and then there's a couple industrial stocks that aren't. I think GE is one of them. They're basically the largest the largest weighting in the S&P by market cap. Apple being number one, and Apple's not considered one of the FANGs, but it is one of the stocks that they're using to keep the S&P propped up. This tells you there's a whole underbelly of stocks that are deteriorating in price in the S&P 500. And then I went and I looked at one of my colleagues pointed this out to me. There's a real ominous divergence between the New York Stock Exchange Composite Index, which is, I don't know, it's somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000 stocks, and the S&P. Now, the New York Stock Exchange hit an all-time high on May 21st, 2015. Okay, and then it's been trending down ever since then. And the S&P obviously hit its all-time high on August 15th this year. and it's been going kind of sideways, although it's going sideways at a slightly lower plateau right now. But at any rate, the NYSE composite has been diverging in performance from the S&P since, I don't know, I have it in here. It's like since 2012, basically. And that also tells you that away from these largest cap stocks that they're using to keep the S&P, I mean, the NYSE composite covers everything listed in the U.S. on the exchanges. And there's a large percentage of those stocks that have been declining in market cap. And so at some point, something's got to give. Either the NYSE composite has to come up and meet the S&P, because there's the chart that I have goes back to '08, and those things have been, it's almost a one-to-one correlation until they start diverging in 2012. And the divergence has gotten wider and wider, and it's the widest it's been since they started diverging in 2012. I mean, it almost looks like a solid line when I have the two lines on this graph up until 2012. So it tells you either all these stocks that are not in the S&P all of a sudden have to rally and move up and recorrelate with the S&P, or the S&P has to come down, and it has to come down quite a bit in order to recorrelate with the NYSE composite. So I guess sort of the bottom line here is, and I make the case in the Short Seller Journal, is that there's a real good chance, regardless of the degree of manipulation going on, that we're going to have an accident in the stock market before the end of the year.
Well, and that goes back to, Craig Hemke over at TF Metals report, and it goes back to his death candle that popped up in August 2015, with about an 18-month timeline on it, 18 to 24 month timeline. And he had proven over, I think, about 25 years that this same situation where the stock market had corrected by 50 to 55% and as high as 59% at one point. And you're saying that there's a 40%, what appears to be about a 40% divergence with the stocks in the S&P and the New York Stock Exchange, or I'm sorry, 40% in the ones that are used to prop up, and everything else, the deterioration, the rot that's going on underneath. So that would seem about right. I mean, if 40% of those stocks sell off, then you're going to have a massive downturn. And do you think that rot is that you were talking about, Dave, is that tied to, do you think, to the stock buybacks either slowing down or stopping? I mean, because that whole corporate buyback situation has been in trouble for some time now, and it's not been as effective, and a lot of companies have moved away from it.
That's a good question, and actually, no. The rot, or in other words, the deterioration in the non-largest cap S&P 500 stocks. So everything below these stocks that they're using to keep the S&P propped up, the rot comes from it reflects the deteriorating business conditions for these companies, because most of them are going to be small and mid-cap companies. And obviously the economy is falling apart. I mean, there's just more and more non-government produced data that is showing that. We had a couple more out today. I think it was industrial production and the Empire State Fed. And industrial production contracts for 13th straight month, longest non-recessionary streak. And then the Empire Fed had a quick dead cat bounce, and new orders and labor remain weak, was what was reflected in that report. And so there's been a general deterioration going on in the stock market. And I actually had presented some data that you don't normally see in the mainstream media in the Short Sellers Journal this week. For instance, one of them is the there's been a big decline in intermodal rail traffic year to date. And intermodal traffic is shipping that uses at least two different modes of transportation. So, for instance, ocean freight, and then it gets transferred to trains, or trains, and then it gets transferred to trucks. And as it turns out, intermodal is used to transport a huge variety of goods that Americans use every day. In fact, just about everything found on a retailer's shelves might have been transported using an intermodal train. So when intermodal train traffic declined, and it's down 3.3% year to date, and there was a 6.4% drop in intermodal year over year for the first week of October, which is what the data is. They have data for that through. And that kind of tells you that if intermodal is declining, it means that all of the businesses that cater to retail consumers are ordering less, and they're ordering less because their retail consumer buyers are buying less. And
Well,
so,
shouldn't they be buying more right now in preparation for the shopping season? I'm sorry, the holiday season that's coming up?
well, that's what you would have thought, but apparently not. And the back to school shopping was a disappointment. And so just to tie this back to the divergence that's going on in the stock market, the earnings and revenues for most of these mid cap and small cap stocks, or even for the non FANG stocks, the revenues and the earnings are deteriorating, and you're seeing, and so what's happening is, and money managers know that, and they're not going to hold on to these stocks. They're going to sell these stocks and put even more money into the stocks that are moving higher, which are the FANG stocks.
Right. Which is going to start feeding on itself.
That's right. That's right. But at some point, there's just going to be a rush to get out of all of these stocks, and it's going to pull down the FANGs as well.
Well, once again, we have hit a bright, cheery note for our listeners.
All right, I can liven this up, man. Gold's having a great day, and I don't think a lot of people have seen this coming. And by the way, India and China are starting to accumulate like crazy. I mean, in India, it's going beyond the smuggled gold and the Dore bars. They're actually, the legal importation of kilo bars has picked up at a phenomenal pace over in India in the last couple of weeks. And it's going to get stronger because we're going into the strongest buying season there. Yep. And the same thing with China. China last week, I prefer to monitor deliveries onto the SGE, Shanghai Gold Exchange, rather than withdrawals. And deliveries last week were, for the week as a whole, it's probably been the most robust week that I've seen of deliveries going into the Shanghai Gold Exchange since maybe, July or August, before China's kind of mellowed out for the rest of the summer.
Well, that is very good news.
Yes.
More absolutely. Physical moving.
That's right. And I also believe that we've probably bottomed out, and I don't know how much longer we're going to kind of go sideways in the mining stocks and the metals, but I think at some point we're going to get another nice move higher.
I think that the mining stocks are ready to start moving to the upside again. It's just my gut. I mean, I don't follow it the way you do, but I think
data.
that
it's technical data. These things are ready to go again, I think.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like I said, I don't look at that. It's just a feeling that I have, and I think that the physical gold buying here in the States and in the Western world is going to pick up from here as well.
I completely agree with you. Completely agree. So that's all we can do is keep doing what we're doing.
That's it. And well, let's do it again on Thursday and see what happens.
That sounds good to me. Look forward to it.
All right, dude. Well, I'll just talk to you then.
I'll talk to you then, Rory.
All right, buddy.